Let's make a thought experiment. If I were to ask you to think about a high-status individual, how would you picture them? I did a quick Google search for fun, and all the images that appeared show these charismatic leaders looking at the camera, exuding confidence. Common wisdom is that high-status actors have it easy. Still, we are all familiar with stories of individuals seeing their standing plummet and organizations falling in rankings. Status comes, but status can also go. And gaining status can actually be a great source of insecurity. With Saverio Dave Favaron and Rodolphe Durand, we focus our attention on actors who suddenly see their status increase. According to the typical view of status, these actors should not have a care in the world. However, what we show is that the insecurity pressures that follow the status increase are so strong that they induce these high-status actors to justify their newly acquired positions. We studied these issues by looking at the restaurant industry. On May 31st of 2016, the director of the Michelin Guide announced the release of the first edition of the guide for Washington, D.C. in the fall of that same year. The entry of Michelin constituted sort of an earthquake in the capital's fine dining scene. Washington, D.C. was only the fourth U.S. city covered by the guide, and the announcement was welcomed with excitement by chefs, customers, critics, as well as by me and my co-authors, who immediately saw the opportunity to document in real time how the introduction of the Red Guide would have affected the behavior of local restaurants. As soon as the announcement was out, we started collecting menus of all restaurants in Washington, D.C., not knowing which ones would have been included and which ones would have not. We waited for the guide to be released in October 2016 and then patiently waited until the following summer to collect again menus from the restaurants that were included in the guide. You see them on the map marked with red pins. What we also did, however, was to collect menus from comparable DC restaurants that were ultimately not included in the guide, the blue pins, as well as comparable restaurants in Boston, a city where Michelin was not present yet. These are the green pins. The advantage of having these two sets of comparable restaurants is that they give us a baseline against which we can estimate how menus of high-status restaurants changed after the restaurants were included in the guide. Look at how different these two menus look. Restaurant menus are much more than a way to convey information about dishes and prices. They can be used as powerful tools to communicate the essential nature of an establishment. And believe it or not, menu engineering is nowadays part of the curriculum taught to industry professionals. So, what do we find? Our results suggest that newly awarded high-status restaurants reacted to their status positions by making three main changes. First, they changed descriptive features of their menus so to make them look more in line with what they thought was expected from high-status restaurants. We document a 10% increase in the length of these descriptions and about half of the references to portion sizes. Second, they put on display the authenticity that characterizes elite players. We observed around a 20% increase in references to food, being for instance sautéed or cooked sous vide, as well as to ingredients being organic, local, or maybe coming from small producers. Third, they adjusted pricing, mostly by increasing the entry price of their menus by a good 5%, so to signal awareness of the value they created for their customers. We also find interesting nuances to these effects. For instance, the tendency to make these changes was more pronounced for restaurants that were included in the guide but were not awarded stars. So think about it next time you hear about the release of a new ranking. Think about how this ranking is going to affect the organizations that appear on it. And also think about this when you sit in a restaurant and look at the menu. It's not just a list of dishes that you're looking at.